This absolutely unbelievable week happened. We saw a global news commentator saying, in so many words, that prosecutors from the Attorney General's office have already received the message from the federal Supreme Court. And the message is, if they don't report or accuse President Bolsonaro, and if he isn't accused, these prosecutors will be held accountable for malfeasance. What is malfeasance? Malfeasance is a crime that a person commits when they do something they should not do or fail to do something they should do due to some personal feeling. In other words, the person violates the law for some personal reason, not for a legal reason, but because they want to, because they like someone or dislike someone, so they act against the law. And what the Supreme Court said is that if the Attorney General's office does not denounce President Bolsonaro, it will be held accountable for the crime of malfeasance. Guys, what happened is absurd for several reasons. When I published this video, the thing that caught the most attention is that the video wasn't watched just once by people. The same people who watched the video once watched it twice because they couldn't believe what they were seeing. And when the ministers of the Supreme Court send a message to the Attorney General's office that they have to prosecute, they are running over everything. They are saying that they have already prejudged this case, that they are interested in this case and have already condemned it, saying, accuse him because we are going to condemn him. There is no other option. And if you don't accuse, you will be the ones responsible for a crime. So what they are doing is completely abandoning an impartial investigation, distancing themselves from the case, and prejudging. One body would be overriding the other, imposing its point of view on the other. The Supreme Court would be obliging the Attorney General's office, which has functional independence under the Constitution, to decide what it has to or does not have to do. But the Supreme Court is not. It is coming in to say, no, you have to accuse Bolsonaro. And if the Attorney General's office understands that it is not the case to accuse Bolsonaro, a Deputy Attorney General, which is the highest position that exists outside the Attorney General of the Republic, one of them, Dr. Carlos Frederico, analyzed the plea and said it was fragile. And if by conviction, by looking at the facts and the evidence, it is understood that it is not the case to accuse President Bolsonaro, who will accuse the public prosecutors of the Attorney General's office of malfeasance, now the person who would accuse would be the public prosecutor's office itself. So how could the federal Supreme Court say that they will respond for malfeasance if not even the accusation of malfeasance is under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court? To me, it seems impossible. That's why people had to watch the video twice. Impossible because whoever exercises the power to accuse is not the Supreme Court, but the Attorney General's office itself. So even if Bolsonaro was not accused, those who would have to accuse the prosecutors would eventually be the prosecutors themselves. So it doesn't make sense. But then I keep thinking, guys, it's impossible. But look, they canceled Lava Jato. That was impossible. They released Lula. That seemed impossible to me. They sentenced Dos Reis on January 8th to 17 years in prison. People with a rosary and a Bible in hand. Impossible. They sent the letter to the federal resistance to stop the investigations into the Supreme Court ministers. Impossible. They are maintaining investigations in the Supreme Court that are notoriously of the first instance. Impossible too. They are legislating, coming in to say whether or not they can have abortions, whether or not they can decriminalize drugs, whether or not they can set a time frame, which is notoriously an activity of the legislative branch. This is also impossible. So guys, what is really impossible for the Supreme Court today? It seems to me that nothing. This scares me tremendously because it shows that the right, the Constitution, and laws are no longer an instrument of containing power, but have become an instrument of exercise of the pure and simple will of power, of the most powerful, the owners of power.